Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, my name is Dr. Ian Phillips, your political analyst for today. And we have another insane Truth Social post here from Donald J. Trump, and it's going to be talking about the future of generic drugs in this country. Spoiler alert, it's one of the worst policies I've ever seen him do that I believe will fully result in the death, suffering, and misery of millions of Americans. Now, let's read it out and then we'll discuss it. So, he says, effective August 1st, 2026, all generic drugs being brought into the United States will continue to have a tariff of 0% for a 2-year period of time, after which the tariff will be raised to 100% for a 1-year period of time and 200% thereafter. This is done in order to reshore generic pharmaceutical production into America, with a penalty to those companies that decided not to build plant and equipment within the stated period of time given to them. The objective of this policy is to protect the people of the United States, and the policy on patented, branded, or innovative drugs, which has been so successful, will remain as is. Pharmaceutical facilities are being built at a level never seen before, all over the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So, as this is actually insane, right? The fact that he would even contemplate raising the price on generic drugs is asinine. But in order to really understand how the prices get raised, I want to just quickly give you a crash course in tariffs, because not a lot of people understand them. But you have to understand tariffs to know how bad of a policy this is. So let me start off here by telling you what it is. We'll talk about the history of tariffs really quick, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what this is likely to do to Americans. So, first things first, a tariff, all that is, it's a tax on goods coming into a country. That's all it is. It's just a tax. When you hear the word tariff, it's a type of tax. That's all it is. So imagine you have the United States and you have, say, Mexico, for example. And let's say Mexico grows a lot of corn. So let's say that, it cost Mexico, $90 to produce one stalk of corn. And let's say that, they're going to sell it. Let's say there's a company in America that's going to sell that. Let's say they got like a company, like a location in America, and they're going to sell that corn for $100 to consumers. So they're going to make 10% profit on their $90 stalk of corn that it took them to produce and like transport it to the United States, so on and so forth. Right? So you pay $100. Now let's say that Donald Trump comes along and he's like, oh man, we need to have a 10% tariff on this corn here. Right? What does that mean? It means that it's going to cost that company 10% more money to get that into the United States. Right? So what's going to happen then? Now it means that people are probably going to pay $110 because, the company is not going to eat that cost. They're not going to say, all right, well, I have a 10% profit margin. Let me just sell my corn for nothing. They're not going to do that. Instead, they're going to pass that on to the consumer. So the consumer will now pay $110 for that one stalk of corn. That used to be $100. Now, in some cases, maybe they eat some, cost themselves, and they're like, all right, like, look, I'll make 8% profit, and I'll sell you that stalk of corn here for, $108, right? It does happen sometimes. But generally speaking, the majority of the cost is always going to be passed on to the consumer. So you're going to pay more money. All it is a tax. Now, the idea behind the tariff is that you want to incentivize businesses to produce things inside of America. So you're not relying on, getting goods from other nations. Now, sometimes there's a benefit to this, sometimes there's not. But if you're a capitalist, right, all the conservatives like to talk about being a capitalist. If you're a capitalist, you do not believe in tariffs. And do you know why you don't believe in tariffs if you're a capitalist? Because that's against a free market economy. That essentially means, right, that you do not believe in free trade if you believe in tariffs. That's what it means. Because, you obviously, competition is going to drive down cost, right? If you have 100 people trading something, that means people are going to buy the lowest cost of that good relative to quality. And as a consequence of that, the prices are going to be lower. But when you remove competition, right, and you only produce something yourself, that means that the prices of things are probably going to stay higher, right? That's what it means. Now, granted, maybe you produce some at home and you get some jobs to stimulate the economy. But, first of all, that only goes so far. And in addition to that, the prices are always going to be higher than they would be if you had actual trade and competition. So really, this is a socialist policy, in some capacity here, or very authoritarian policy, kind of socialist to some degree in the sense that you're removing competition. Right? Marxist maybe is a better word, but it's not really, right? It's not really socialist policy per se. It's a very authoritarian policy. You're stifling competition. It's very anti-market. I don't know necessarily what that word would be. But I can tell you this here, it's not looking good. And and I can tell you that from the bottom of my heart here. Now, what is the history behind these tariffs? Well, the United States was founded on a hatred for tariffs. We despise them. We dislike more than anything tariffs. We found an entire revolution breaking away from Great Britain over a couple percent tariff, right? On things like, like this, with things like the Stamp Act, for example, or, prices of tea, right? We hate tariffs. But for some reason now, the American people are so propagandized, right? They've been beat down for so long that we just sort of put up with these absolutely insane numbers, and nobody seems to do anything about it. And people call it out, but nothing gets done at the end of the day. And the politicians still remain in power, and they know that they can get away with it now. And so all this really is to protect the donors of people like Donald Trump. All this really is to reduce that competition here, and try to make it so that way maybe people produce stuff at home can make a lot more money, probably because they're really high donors. That would probably be how I sort of conceptualize this. Now, in some ways too, you want to be thinking about how the policy it has nothing to do necessarily even with the cost, but it also has something to do with lives. And so again, like money goes a long way here for saving people's lives. So it's not just to do with money, it's also to do with lives. And what do we mean by that? Well, there's an estimated more than 1.1 million American patients who could die over the next decade because they cannot afford their prescription medications. That's roughly 110,000 deaths per year within that population, although there's no universally accepted estimate for all Americans. And I got the numbers right in front of me here. I'm reading it off. And it says each year about 9.2 million U.S. adults ages 18 to 64 report skipping doses, taking less medication, or delaying prescriptions because of the cost, while millions of older adults also report the cost-related non-adherence. That's very, very bad. And so as a sitting president of the United States, what you have to ask yourself is, all right, shouldn't I try my best to lower the cost of these generic drugs? So that way people can have access to the medications that they need. And I think if you have any sort of moral boundaries, moral guidelines, you would agree with that sentiment. But Donald Trump does not. And he believes that you should therefore pay 200% more. We should triple the cost of your medications, your generic medications coming from overseas. Now, will this maybe start some American pharmaceutical companies? Sure. But now they have no competition. So what are they going to do? Of course they're going to raise the fucking prices. And if people could not afford them before, they're certainly not going to be able to afford these medications now. It's only going to get worse from here. So yeah, maybe it's fine for a couple years. It's like, but when those kick in year 3, when those kick in year 4, it's game over, buddy. It's going to get very, 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 very bad for you. And it's going to get bad very, very quickly. And as president of the United States, you should not be allowed to stand for that. But yet, we live in a broken society. We live in a falling republic. Right? We're like Rome, where people are looting the coffers and burning the city to the ground. And it almost feels like there's nothing that we can do about it. We need a revolution in this country to stop these very people from doing what they're doing. And people like Donald Trump, and expressing their sentiment. He needs to be voted out of power. He needs to be impeached immediately. This is an action that is so evil, it's almost unthinkable. Now, having said that, I hope I provided you guys a nice little background there with respects to tariffs, just what they are and, how this could be very bad for the American people. Think about it. You're just going to be raising the cost of things, right? And again, like think about how expensive everything's gotten over the past 10 years. Right? And in consequence, in part, this is as a consequence of tariffs. Again, it's not all it is. Obviously, there's things like inflation and price gouging, but tariffs is also thrown in there as well, right? Lots of things are more expensive as a consequence of tariffs. And what's really weird to me is that Donald Trump was just recently ordered by a court to pay back money for some tariffs. If you think about, again, the cost being passed on to the consumers, the businesses didn't even really eat any of those, I guess you would say losses, kind of, potential losses. Instead, they got awarded money for losses that they didn't really take. And now, the American people ended up having to pay for it twice, right? We had to pay with higher prices at our stores and for our products. And we also have to pay back taxpayer money now to corporations who pass the cost along to us, all as a consequence of Donald Trump's horrible tariff campaign. It's very bad. It's very dangerous. And this is something that we cannot stand for, ladies and gentlemen. We have to speak up about it. And again, we have to do our research and we have to understand things. This is just, again, politics 101 here. So with that said, guys, hope you did enjoy the video here today. If you did, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for some more content. My name's Dr. Ian Phillips. You can follow me on social media at Ian Phillips USA. Try to get us to 600 subscribers, and we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.